Hey, friend, I hope you know this is Pat Boone, and you and I are enjoying TV Confidential with my buddy Ed.
Now, here we are. An English lady, while visiting Switzerland, was looking for a room, and she asked the schoolmaster if he could recommend any to her.
Ed Robertson bringing you an encore presentation of a special edition of The Sounds of Lost Television from February 2012, in which Phil, Gries, and I look back at the famous water closet joke controversy that led Jack Paar to walk off as host of The Tonight Show on the air several minutes into the program that aired on February 11th, 1960. A set of circumstances that found Parr's announcer, Hugh Downs, having to step in as host of The Tonight Show that night at pretty much a moment's notice. Later on this segment, we will play a clip from a conversation that Phil, Gries, and I had with Hugh Downs on TV Confidential back in September 2013, in which Hugh Downs himself described the unpredictability that was part and parcel of working with Jack Paar and how Downs had hoped to talk Paar out of walking off the show in the moments leading up to the February 11th, 1960 broadcast. We'll play that later on this segment. In the meantime, as we went to break, Phil and I were talking about how not everyone would have been able to handle the responsibility of hosting the show in midstream. Hugh Downs was a different cat altogether.
Well, he does fill in. In fact, he takes over for 79 remaining minutes. For the record, Downs also hosted the following night show, February 12th, and guest Orson Bean on the 11th February, who was a guest then, also then becomes guest host the following night on the 13th. You had Hugh Downs as a very loyal friend and co-host partner with Paar from the onset. They had been together for many years, and he began with Jack Paar on The Tonight Show when it premiered. Paar, while very controversial, and he did wear his heart on his sleeve, like you stated, Hugh Downs brought another type of personality to the program. In fact, I believe Hugh Downs has more hours logged on TV than any other individual. I believe he's in the Guinness World Records for having the most logged hours on TV. At the time, he had been around for quite some time as well. So for him to take over, which was not a novelty, because there had been times where Hugh Downs would host the program. In fact, for the record, it was Jack Paar who first initiated the substitute host format. And in 1958, as a matter of fact, Johnny Carson, who would later succeed Jack Paar, actually filled in for Paar as a substitute host on two occasions, for 2 weeks. So Hugh Downs also had that opportunity. So he was able to certainly have the expertise and background and experience to do what he did, but under the circumstances of Paar leaving, not knowing that he really left for good, that was, I think, a big challenge, which he handled, in my opinion, beautifully.
Two thoughts, Phil, listening to Hugh Downs, as we did when you played the clip for us in our previous segment. One, he proved prescient when he said that he hopes that Paar changed his mind. Paar eventually did change his mind, only it took him a few weeks for him to do that. And B, Downs, speaking of Paar being very impulsive and emotional, making decisions like that on the spot, only to change his mind upon further reflection.
Absolutely. When he left the show, Paar, and I quote, stated, I am going to leave the country and go to Europe, maybe the Mediterranean area where it's warm. He said from his home in suburban Bronxville. And then he stated, in quotes, I need a big, long rest. And obviously he did leave for a number of weeks. He returned on March 7th, 1960. And when he did return, he walked on stage and he struck a kind of Jack Benny pose. And he opened with, and I quote, as I was saying before I was interrupted. And there he was back. And after he got a thunderous round of applause and laughter, and when that subsided, and then Paar said to the audience, when he walked off, he said, there must be a better way of making a living. Well, I looked, and there isn't.
We're talking to Phil Gries as we relive the night of February 11th, 1960, the night in which Jack Paar walked off the set of The Tonight Show in protest of a decision made by NBC the night before in reference to a joke that has gone down in the annals of TV history as the water closet joke. Now, you mentioned, I believe you mentioned earlier, Phil, that in that 4-week period between the time in which Paar walked on February 11, 1960, and March 7, 1960, when Paar returned to The Tonight Show, there were a number of people filling in for Paar as host of the show, including Hugh Downs. One of the people who I believe filled in was actor-comedian Orson Bean, and in addition to filling in for Paar, Orson Bean was one of Parr's guests on the night of The Tonight Show, February 11, 1960.
Very, very true. And Hugh Downs, after taking over on the 11th, also hosted The Tonight Show the following night on February 12th. And on February 13th, Orson Bean became the substitute host that night. And they had a string of different substitute hosts during the approximate 3 weeks that Paar was off. I might add one last little footnote with regard to a quote from Paar when he came back, and I'm going to quote what he stated to the press. He said, "Be it ever so humble, there's no place like Radio City. Leaving the show is a childish and perhaps emotional thing. I have been guilty of such action in the past and will perhaps be again. I'm totally unable to hide what I feel. It is not an asset in show business. But I shall do the best I can to amuse and entertain you and let other people speak freely as I have in the past."
Speaking of people speaking freely, Orson Bean spoke freely about NBC on the night of February 11th, 1960, and we will hear some audio from that right now.
I'm very moved by it. I'm very touched. I'm very upset, and I don't know exactly what I feel, but it becomes rarer and rarer in this day and age, particularly in this business, to find somebody who is capable of feeling anything. And I think that the reason for Parr's success, talent can be discussed from now till doomsday. He is able to feel as a human being, and it's fascinating. And here he has come at loggerheads with a mass institution which is no better and no worse than the other multi-million-dollar institutions. They are all dehumanized. NBC is just as dehumanized as any of them. They have no loyalty. Well, I don't know if they're going to run this or not. They probably won't because they don't have any loyalty, and on top of that, they don't have any guts.
No. Wouldn't it be funny if there was a guy around taking names of cameramen that were applauding? No.
You'd have to take them all.
Let me just interpolate one thing, Orson, in line with what you say. A long time ago, I have to agree with you that a long time ago I shifted my loyalty to individuals.
No, boy.
And individuals can make a great corporation. But there is a tendency for corporations to become a little soulless.
Well, this man is capable of being hurt. That's why he's capable of feeling, and he's capable of being hurt, and NBC has hurt him badly. And he's gone, and I don't think he will be back. And if he doesn't, he'll be back on some show, but I won't be a bit surprised if he doesn't come back here.
Orson Bean on The Tonight Show on the night of February 11th, 1960, speaking from the heart on the matter of Jack Paar walking off the set of The Tonight Show, which he had done moments earlier, the audio of which is courtesy of our friend Phil Gries, ATVaudio.com. A couple of thoughts off the top of my head, Phil. Bean said, I don't know whether NBC will allow it. Obviously they did. And I imagine they probably aired it because, they knew that there would be a large public interest of people wondering, okay, will he come back later that night or will he come back perhaps the following night?
Well, yes, there was really no specific, definitive awareness as to exactly what Paar had intended. We knew the next day he walked off, big headlines. Will he come back the following night? And then, as it unraveled, it became more apparent that Paar was incognito and could not be communicated with, and he literally took off, and there was a time where even NBC didn't know where to contact him. I might add that it was Jonathan Winters who played an instrumental role in convincing Paar to return. And then finally, after rethinking, Paar did return on March 7th and resumed his role as Tonight Show host.
There is one more clip I would like to play, but before we play it, I want to go back to something Hugh Downs said in his opening comments after he took over the microphone that night, and which is, I believe the exact quote was, "Jack did not do this for effect." Now, it is easy for you and I, as we listen to this 65 years later, to wonder whether that's a disingenuous remark, because obviously there was an effect. You just don't walk off the air of a highly rated late-night talk show as he did in February 1960. But as we've talked about, and as Downs will say in the clip we're about to play, Paar was impulsive. Paar did stuff like that all the time. And with that in mind, this is a clip. It was toward the end of the show. Hugh Downs took questions from the audience, and one of the questions was, what is Jack Paar really like? One of the voices we'll hear will be Hugh Downs. Another voice we'll hear will be Shelley Berman, comedian Shelley Berman, who was also a guest on the Jack Paar Tonight Show that night, February 11th, 1960.
This is one thing that should be understood. People who keep asking, they still do, what is Jack Paar really like? And there's one thing... No, we know, man. There's one thing that I don't know why, if this fails to come across on television, and perhaps it does in a way, or people wouldn't continue to ask, but there is nothing phony about anything Jack has ever done. If he looks elated and happy, he is elated and happy. If he looks depressed and sad, he is depressed and sad. He is not a phony. And that's the thing that maybe people think that he does things occasionally for effect, and I have never known him to do anything for effect. Have you, Shelley?
No.
I mean, of important nature.
Except to perform for effect, but not in...
Not when he's in the air of reality of talking to people and giving his opinion.
He's a pretty straight cat. Very, very sincere man.
Very straight cat, very sincere man, very authentic, which as listeners of this program know, Phil, authentic is a word that means a lot to me. And the reason why Paar was successful hosting The Tonight Show and had the large audience and loyal audience that he had was because he was authentic. This is a cliche, but they broke the mold after they made him.
They truly did. He had a very, very special moment in time hosting The Tonight Show for... not so long. When you compare Johnny Carson's 30-year history hosting The Tonight Show, Jack Paar only hosted The Tonight Show for approximately 4.5 years, from July 29th, 1957 to March 30th, 1962. And I might add that between all the hosts from The Tonight Show's debut until Carson, there were approximately 2,000 episodes of Tonight Shows that were telecast, and almost all of them are gone.
Fortunately, a few of them are available through our friend Phil Gries, founder and owner of archival television audio, atvaudio.com. Stay with us, folks. We'll be right back. One more item. Are you starting a company in an emerging market or developing something new? Do you have intellectual property but aren't sure how to protect it? Reach out to our friends at Tectonic Law. They offer rock-solid representation for groundbreaking industries who need help capturing and protecting their full portfolio of intellectual property and intangible assets, including trademark rights, brand assets, copyright rights, publicity rights, and privacy rights. Tectonic Law streamlines the complex intricacies of intellectual property and business law in easy-to-understand terms that will help you and your company form a concrete plan of action to secure and protect the value of your brand and your creative work product. Tectonic Law is licensed to practice throughout the state of California. They also practice before such tribunals as the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office and the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. Go to tectoniclaw.com, tectoniclaw.com, to learn more about how Tectonic Law can help your business thrive. tectoniclaw.com. Rock-solid representation for groundbreaking industries.
This portion of TV Confidential is brought to us by our friends at Front Porch Realty, the community of realtors in the Northern Bay area of California that is committed to finding the solution that is best for their clients. Whether you're a first-time home buyer or looking to sell or lease your property in Northern California, call Karen Strain at 415-886-7411 or visit FrontPorchRealtyGroup.com for more information on how they can help you.
Hi, this is Harry Shearer, and you are listening to TV Confidential, a radio show about television.
Phil, Gries, and I had an opportunity to talk to Hugh Downs about working with Jack Paar, particularly during the 4.5 years that Paar hosted the Tonight Show, during a conversation that originally aired on TV Confidential in September 2013. As we have a few minutes left in this segment, we thought we'd close out our 65th anniversary look at the water closet joke controversy by playing a clip of Hugh Downs talking to Phil and me about working with Jack Paar. As we pick up the conversation, Phil and I asked Hugh Downs if he knew what Paar was going to do on the night he walked off the show. As we pick up the conversation, Phil and I asked Hugh Downs if he knew what Paar was going to do on the night he walked off the show.
Well, the answer is yes and no, because I didn't know. I knew that he intended to leave, but I thought because he was dressed properly and he'd been through makeup and everything, that he was going to do the show. Everything about it seemed like he was going to do the show, and at the end, say, "Friends, I've had it, and I'm leaving," and then leave. And knowing Jack, I knew he really was going to leave. What surprised me was he left at the beginning of the show and not the end. That was my surprise, and I couldn't figure out. He called me, and we seldom had conversations before we were on the air. We just really conversed on the air. That's how natural he was. And he called me in early, and he said, and he was all dressed, and he said, "Do you know names of any good writers or people who can perform?" And he was obviously hunting for someone. And I thought, well, maybe a big guest walked out, and he wanted to find somebody. But what he was doing was bolstering me in case something went wrong or somebody didn't show. He was kind enough, he wanted me to have that extra guest or something, because he knew, and I didn't, that he was going to leave at the beginning of the program. And he did. He did his little come on thing for just a few minutes, and then rather cheerfully, he departed, and I thought there was going to be some kind of a best line comeback of some kind. And after he left, I stared at the curtain for a while, because I thought, well, he's going to come back now with some kind of a line. He never came back. He was on his way to Singapore. and I was stuck there all the rest of the time. And we were recording early back then. Mm-hmm. And I remember that one of the comedians, guests that was on, said they'll never play this on the air.
I have a letter from you back in May of 2012, and I'm going to quote what you wrote to me. You said, and I quote, "I do remember since we had started taping the show, 8:15 to 10 p.m., a meeting I was in on then where there was a debate among the NBC brass about whether or not to air the tape. Shelley, Berman, that's the comedian you're referring to, had said to me right after we shut down at 10 o'clock, nobody will ever see this. They're not going to air it. I think in the meeting, and then you're stating about your thoughts, I threatened to kill myself at NBC's entrance if I went through that and they didn't air it. And I must say, you were fantastic in terms of taking over, and I know that for a fact because I have a very rare audio air check of that show, and it has all of the post-Paar walkout material when you took over.
I have that. I thank you, Phil, but I'm much in your debt for what I call archive work that I have. Mm-hmm. Largely has come from you, and I want to thank you again.
Well, it has been my pleasure, and I'm going to quote one more line from another letter you wrote me. You said, "Without hard evidence such as you have sent, what proof could there be that any of this really happened, that maybe it was all imagined?" I love that line because it's so true. 50, 60 years goes by, it's almost like, did it ever happen?
Yeah, I know what you mean. You're right. I wonder how many things in the world are like that. Maybe something that Winston Churchill said, or something that, I don't know, Queen Elizabeth I said, is not known and never will be because it didn't get recorded one way or another. True.
And that's the thing, because people being what they are and memory being what it is, as the years go by, we may not remember certain things unless we stumble upon a letter that we wrote 10 years ago in which I remember, I forgot I did that, or in the case of, Phil, you're providing audio of something you had done, 40, 50, 60 years ago. I remember I did that. Let's see. Going back to the night Paar walked out, okay, you didn't think he was going to walk out on the air, and now you've got to fill an hour and a half of material. But fortunately, Hugh, you had a lot of experience, improvising and doing live television, or even though that was recorded. I mean, live on tape. So you may not have known in the moment how I'm going to get through this, but you knew how to do it anyway.
Well, it turns out that way, and the bottom line may be the truth. If you're trying to weave a web of lies, it would be horrible. Life would be just awful. But as long as you're telling the truth about everything, it's pretty easy to handle. It really makes a big difference, I think. If your life is open and truthful, you can, where necessary, on the spot, on ad lib, you can say what happened, and you don't have trouble doing that if what you're telling is the truth.
Broadcast legend Hugh Downs from a conversation with Phil Gries and me that originally aired in September 2013 here on TV Confidential. Hugh Downs passed away July 1st, 2020. February 11th, 2025 marks the 65th anniversary of the night when Hugh Downs witnessed Jack Paar walk off as host of The Tonight Show at the beginning of that night's broadcast in protest of NBC censoring him for a joke he had told the night before. For more on Phil Gries, ATBaudio.com. We'll play part 2 of our conversation with Erica Gavin when we come back, and then we will welcome actor, author, and Emmy Award-winning producer Lawrence Luckinbill. All that and more when we come back for hour number 2 of TV Confidential. Please stay with us.
Accredited by Guinness World Records, welcome to Archival Television Audio Incorporated, a peerless TV soundtrack archive, preserving the audio from television's first 3 decades, the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, the golden and silver age of television.
For more information, go to atbaudio.com.